And again, the third component, I think we talked about it, maybe diminished capacity with older people. You're dealing with maybe dementia, Alzheimer's, got medications mixed in, and again, that could kind of maybe add to this. Can you speak to any of these in your own words?
I can certainly try to
Sure,
speak to
sure.
that. Just kind of keeping in mind too, some of the folks that are abused, it may already have been a lifelong abusive situation, domestic violence. Just because they become elderly and become isolated doesn't necessarily create the abuse situation, although that is another component of that. So you have a situation where you have either a husband or wife abusing the other partner, then they become elderly and frail. We actually have seen more of, because I actually am not an expert in that area, but in doing some research, that it says predominantly the females are the ones who are being abused still, as kind of, I would say, the proportion in society. Yet we have abusive males as patients here, and then now they're the frail ones, whether they have Parkinson's disease, can't move, or some other ailment, and now they're at the mercy, if you would, of their wives who they've abused all their lives. But because of that marital relationship, they don't want to leave. They lose their benefits, their income, their housing. Then so we have to always be very aware of that, because they're not always the abuser is now in the position to become the abusee, by a little retaliation, if you would. So we have to be very
Payback.
cognizant. Yes,
And
yes.
you do see that
We've actually seen that, yes, and we have to be very cautious with that. Help educate, that spouse who's now the caregiver, get support for them, get help in the home. We've also seen, as you had said earlier about the isolation in the home, that you have perfectly good couples, and there is very little income out there. There's very little help for them at the time, or their perception of that. So they're trying to do everything, and the stress is so great. I mean, you talk about caregiver burnout as professionals, who people come in and do shift work, and there's still burnout with that. Let alone someone who's caring for a spouse, and then whether they've had a stroke or something else, then they have less capacity to understand what their loved one is doing. So they will act out, either hit their loved.
If you look at the risk factors, particularly in elderly white males, the issue of declining health, ongoing stress, some triggering event that occurs to them, usually it's a struggle in their family or with their health, and they become extremely dysregulated. They don't see a way out of it. They don't see any hope, and they act out very violently. This murder-suicide pattern is the pattern we sometimes see, where usually the male, using a gun, will shoot their spouse or significant other, and then execute themselves or do suicide by cop, which is in this case.
Which I'm not sure. I can't remember which
Okay.
was, but it was one or the other.
But if you look at this, it's a complex issue. It is not the same as the kind of interpersonal violence you see in youth. The issues are different. We have an individual who's usually someone who has been used to being in control, relies on their health, usually physical labor kind of person, or somebody that's done something where as they get older they're no longer able to function like they once were. I'm sorry, your tape recording.
Oh, that's fine. That's what we're yeah.
And so they start believing that the only way out of this is to engage in this kind of last ditch kind of effort to make a statement of personal control. Now we're talking about the high-end events, these murder, suicide events, when we talk about interpersonal violence. When you boil it down below that threshold, we have to consider the fact that as individuals change and as they age, the aging brain reacts differently in different people. Some people become more agitated, more easily irritable, more easily frustrated, more depressed. And when men become depressed, it is not the same thing as when women become depressed. It is a very different manifestation of depression in males. Males tend to be angrier. They tend to act out the depression more.
Aggressive.
They tend to become aggressive. And so that kind of aggression spills out into those around them. They start targeting individuals around them as explanations or as outlets for their aggression. They may blame their partner for things that aren't going well. They start attributing things to their partner which aren't true, and seeing their partner then as part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So that increases the risk of interpersonal violence, not just physical violence, but verbal violence, psychological abuse. So, and I'm talking